The ring was not hers, but her husband had died with it hidden under their bed. She had been married to him for 34 years. Yet the ring beneath their bed belonged to another family, one waiting in Korea. Tola Adebayo found it 11 months after burying Delhi, a Tuesday morning in October, working through the old leather suitcase she had avoided for almost a year. She expected work papers. What she found instead, beneath a false lining, was a small drawstring pouch. Inside it, a gold wedding ring, engraved with Korean characters. And beneath the ring, a faded photograph of Delhi, young, maybe 26, standing at the Lagos waterfront with a Korean man his same age, arms around each other like brothers. On the back, in Delhi's handwriting, J. Brother. Forgive me. Tola sat on the edge of the bed and did not move for a long time. She had married Delhi at 24, and they had been young and broke and completely certain about each other. Saad came a year later. Femi 2 years after that. The children had grown up, moved out, built their own lives while Tola and Delhi settled into the quiet rhythms of a long marriage. She had thought she knew him completely, every habit, every mood, every memory he carried. She had been wrong. She showed her children that evening. Saad, 34 now, turned the ring over slowly and said nothing for a full minute. Femi, 31, studied the photograph with the practical frown he had inherited directly from his father. Daddy never mentioned a Korean friend, Saad said finally. He never mentioned a lot of things, Femi said, not unkindly. Tola took the ring to a Korean graduate student at the university the following week. The inscription translated to, "With you, until there is no more time." A wedding vow. Someone had worn this ring on the most important day of their life. Somehow it had ended up under Delhi's bed. She hired a small research agency. The name J combined with the Lagos waterfront and the late 1980s narrowed things considerably. 3 weeks later, the agency came back with a family in Seoul, the Kangs. An older brother named Jae Kong who had gone to Nigeria in 1988 as a civil engineer and, according to family records, never came back. Tola booked a flight to Seoul. Saad came to the airport and spent the drive there arguing against it. You don't know these people. You don't speak the language. What exactly is the plan? Return the ring, Tola said. Find out the truth. And if the truth is something painful? Tola looked at her daughter. Saad. Your father wrote "forgive me" on the back of a photograph he kept hidden for 30 years. The painful part already happened. I'm just going to find out what it was. She landed at Incheon on a gray November morning. The airport was vast and ordered and entirely indifferent to her. She stood in the arrivals hall with a printed address, a photograph, and the ring in her bag, feeling the specific loneliness of a person who has traveled very far with no guarantee of what waits at the other end. She was organizing her folder when she dropped it. Papers scattered across the polished floor, the photograph, the translation, the address. A man crouched immediately and gathered them up, without being asked. He was perhaps 60, salt and pepper hair, a dark coat, calm in the way of someone accustomed to being calm. He straightened and held the papers out. Then his eyes landed on the photograph. He went still. Not frozen still. The way a person goes still when something reaches them before their mind has caught up. Where did you get this? His English was careful and precise. My late husband kept it hidden, Tola said, for about 30 years. The man looked at the photograph for another moment. Then he looked at her, and she could see it in his face. Recognition, grief, something that had been waiting a long time to land. My name is Miho Kong, he said quietly. The young man beside your husband is my brother, Jay. I have not seen him since 1993. They found a cafe near the terminal and sat across from each other with tea neither of them touched. Tola told him everything. The suitcase, the false lining, the ring, the inscription, the agency's search. Miho listened without interrupting, his hands flat on the table. When she finished, he said, Jay went to Lagos in 1988. A 2-year engineering contract, bridge construction in the mainland. He was 29. He paused. He wrote home regularly in the first year. The letters became shorter after that. Then they stopped. His last letter? Said he had met someone. That he was happy. that he would explain everything when he returned. Miho looked at the photograph. He never returned. We contacted the Nigerian embassy. My father hired someone to look. Nothing came back.
He stopped.
Eventually my father said we would not speak of Jay anymore, that a man who chose to disappear did not deserve to be chased. But you didn't accept that. No, he said simply. I never accepted that. Tola opened her bag and placed the ring on the table. Miho looked at it for a long moment. He picked it up slowly, turned it over, read the inscription. His expression did not collapse. He was not that kind of man, but something moved through it that was unmistakably grief. This was a wedding ring, he said. Yes. Jay was married in Lagos. He set the ring down carefully. We never knew. None of us knew. He looked at her. Your husband, Delhi. How did he know Jay? I don't know yet, she said honestly. Then there is still something missing. Yes. He looked at her steadily. I have a car. And I have things at home, old correspondence, things that arrived after we stopped looking. I never threw them away. He paused. Would you come? Tola looked at this man she had known for less than an hour. She thought of Delhi's handwriting on the back of the photograph. Forgive me. 30 years of silence, and at the end, 2 words that explained nothing. Yes, she said. I'll come. Miho's home was in Mapogu, a quiet neighborhood, older buildings, a street lined with small shops. The apartment was orderly and a little sparse in the way of a person who has lived alone long enough to stop filling space for its own sake. A photograph of a woman on the wall, his late wife, she would learn later. Barley tea on the stove. His daughter Hannah arrived 20 minutes after they did. She was 36, efficient, composed, and immediately suspicious. She poured tea and sat down and asked Tola 3 precise questions in the first 5 minutes. How did you find us? What do you want? Who else knows you're here? They were not rude questions, exactly. They were the questions of a woman protecting someone she loved from something she did not yet understand. Tola answered each one directly. Hannah listened. The suspicion did not leave her face, but it adjusted slightly, became watchful rather than hostile. Miho brought a wooden box from the study. He set it on the table, without ceremony. Inside, tied in bundles with faded ribbon, were letters. Unopened. In Jay's handwriting. These arrived in a package 6 months after we stopped looking, Miho said. No return address. They were sealed. My father refused to read them. After he died, I took them. I have read them many times. He looked at Tola. But there are things in them I could never explain because I did not have the other half of the story. He lifted the first letter. I think, he said, you may have it. He began to read. Tola listened as Jay's voice came through 30 years of silence, careful at first, then more honest, then urgent in the way of someone who has run out of time to be anything else. The letters moved through his years in Lagos, the construction project, the city that surprised him. A woman named Amara he had met through a colleague at a site inspection in 1989. By the 3rd letter, the picture was clear. Jay and Amara had fallen in love with the quiet seriousness of people who know they have found something real. By the 5th letter, they were married, a small ceremony private because both of them were afraid of what their families would say. By the 7th letter, Amara was pregnant. And then the 8th letter. Miho's voice changed as he read it. It did not break. But it changed. He read slowly, and Hannah translated with her eyes fixed on the page, and the room went completely quiet. Jay was sick. Seriously, quickly sick. The letter did not name the illness, but the year was 1992, and the details needed no naming. He wrote that he was afraid. He wrote that the construction contract had long since ended, but he had stayed for Amara, and then for the baby coming, and now he was not sure he would be well enough to travel even if he wanted to. He wrote that a young man, Delhi, Amara's cousin's close friend, who had become something like a younger brother to him over the years, had promised to look after Amara if the worst came. And then he wrote something that stopped the room entirely. There is one more thing I need to tell you. Something about Delhi. Something I made him promise never to reveal while I was alive because I was ashamed and because I thought I would have time to fix it myself. But I am running out of time, and so I need you to know. The letter ended there. Miho turned the page over, then turned it back. That is where this one stops, he said quietly. He reached for the next letter in the bundle. It was not there. The 9th letter was missing. The sequence jumped from 8 to 10, and 10 began mid-thought, as if it expected the reader to already know what had been said before. Tola looked at the gap in the bundle. The missing letter. The sentence that stopped at "I need you to know." 30 years of silence. A ring under a bed. Forgive me. And somewhere in Lagos, an answer that had not yet been found. The missing letter was in Lagos the entire time. It took Tola 4 days to find it, working through Saad from Seoul, her daughter making calls to people who knew people who remembered things. Delhi's elderly aunt in Suralere, a woman in her mid-80s with a memory like a locked cabinet, was the one who finally said, quietly, over the phone, yes. Jay gave Delhi a letter to keep. He said it was for the family in Korea. He made Delhi promise to send it only when there was no other choice. Delhi had never sent it. The aunt still had it. Delhi had given it to her for safekeeping decades ago, and she had kept it the way old women keep things, carefully, without quite knowing why, trusting that the reason would eventually appear. Saad photographed each page and sent them to Tola's phone at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. Tola sat on the edge of the hotel bed and read with Miho beside her, their heads close together over the small screen, Hannah across the room translating in a low voice while her husband kept their children in the other room and gave them this. Jay's handwriting was shakier in this letter. It had been written in the last weeks of his life. He explained everything. In 1988, when Jay first arrived in Lagos, he had not come alone in the way his family believed. He had come carrying a debt. A financial arrangement made by his father, a loan taken to fund the family business, had gone wrong, and a creditor in Seoul was pressuring the Kong family. Jay had taken the Lagos contract partly for the salary, and partly because distance had seemed, at 29, like a solution. What he had not told his family was that before leaving, in a moment of panic he would spend years regretting, he had forged his father's signature on a document transferring a small piece of Kong family land to cover the debt. The land was minor. The debt was cleared. His father never knew. But Jay knew. And the shame of it had calcified inside him year by year, making it harder to write, harder to call, harder to imagine sitting across from his father and being fully honest. He had told himself he would fix it, buy back the land, confess, make it right. Then he met Amara, and life grew larger and more urgent, and the confession kept getting pushed to a tomorrow that never quite arrived. I told Delhi, the letter said. He was the only one I told. He did not judge me. He said every man carries something he is ashamed of, and the only sin worse than the original one is dying without trying to repair it. He was 24 years old when he said this, and he was wiser than I deserved. When I became too sick to travel, I gave Delhi the ring. Amara's ring. I asked him to return it to my family in Korea, to Miho, because I wanted them to know that I had loved someone truly, even if I had failed them in other ways. I asked him to carry this letter and send it when the time was right. Delhi promised. He always kept his promises. But I think I asked too much of him. I think the weight of knowing everything, about the land, about Amara, about me, became something he carried in silence because he did not know how to put it down without breaking something. If you are reading this, it means Delhi has gone too. It means the ring found its way home another way. I am sorry it took so long. I am sorry for all of it. But please, find my son. His name is Kong Soo. He was born in January 1993. He has his mother's smile, and I hope, somewhere, something of mine. Take care of Miho. He always believed in people more than they deserved. Forgive me. The room was quiet for a long time. Hannah was the first to speak. Her voice was unsteady in a way Tola had not heard before. He forged grandfather's signature. It was not quite a question. Yes, Miho said. And he was too ashamed to come home. Yes. Hannah looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, he must have been so lonely. Miho reached across and put his hand over hers. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Tola looked at the last lines of the letter again. Find my son. She looked up at Miho. Kong Soo, she said. Let's find him. Amara had died in 1996, a complication following a second pregnancy that did not survive, Delhi's Anne explained, her voice careful and sad in the way of someone who has long since run out of new ways to grieve old losses. The baby Amara lost in that pregnancy was a boy who had not lived long enough to be named. Amara herself had not recovered. Kong Su had been 3 years old. He had gone to live with Amara's mother, his grandmother, in her home in Ibadan. The grandmother had raised him with love and without much explanation, because he was too young for explanation, and then, when he was old enough, she did not quite know how to begin. She had renamed him Samuel Okafor, her own surname, clean and simple, a name that asked no difficult questions. She had told him his father was Korean, that his father had loved his mother, and that his father had died before he was born, which was true in the way that only the most important fact was shared, and the rest was left for later. Later had never quite come. Samuel Okafor was 33 years old. He lived in Ibadan, an hour from Lagos. He was a structural engineer, a fact that, when Saad texted it to Tola, made her close her eyes for a moment. An engineer, like his father. Saad had reached him through a colleague of a colleague, the Lagos network doing what it has always done, moving information through people until it finds the right door. She had said only that there was a family matter, that it involved his father's family in Korea, and that a woman named Tola Adebayo would like to speak with him. He had said yes within 20 minutes. Tola called him that same evening from Miho's living room, Miho sitting across from her, Hannah standing in the doorway. She told Samuel the story carefully, starting from the suitcase and working forward, leaving nothing out. He listened without interrupting, the way his uncle Miho listened. She noticed this and filed it quietly. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "My grandmother always said my father was a good man who made a mistake and spent his whole life trying to make up for it. She said that was the most human thing a person could do." Tola felt something loosen in her chest. "Would you come to Seoul?" she asked. Another pause. Shorter this time. "Yes," Samuel said. "I'll come." The family dinner was Hannah's idea, which surprised everyone including Hannah. She organized it with the same precision she applied to everything: a private room at a restaurant near the old palace, enough food for twice the number of people, a seating arrangement that mixed the two families rather than dividing them. Femi had flown in from Lagos because Saad had called him and said, "Femi, get on a plane," in a tone that foreclosed argument. Saad herself appeared on a tablet screen propped against the fruit bowl, her face bright and her commentary continuous. Samuel arrived the day before the dinner. Miho met him at the airport, not with Tola this time, because Tola had quietly suggested that this first moment should belong to Miho alone, and Miho had looked at her with an expression she was learning to read, gratitude offered without words. She heard about it later. How Miho had recognized Jay immediately in the shape of Samuel's face, the forehead, the way he held his shoulders. How they had stood for a moment looking at each other, and then Miho had simply put his arms around him, and Samuel had held on. The dinner itself was, at the start, exactly as cautious as 8 people from 2 countries with a complicated shared history would be. Femi, who handled discomfort by asking direct questions, turned to Miho early in the evening and said, "Sir, my mother has been in Seoul for nearly 2 weeks. She has been in your home, in your car, investigating a 30-year mystery with you." He set down his chopsticks. "I need to ask, what are your intentions?" The table went quiet. Miho looked at Femi without discomfort. "My intention is to find my brother's son," he said. "My intention is to be honest with your mother about everything I know." He paused briefly. "And my intention is to not pretend that I have not greatly valued her company." Saad, on the tablet, made a sound she converted unconvincingly into a cough. Tola looked at her plate. Hannah, who had spent 2 weeks moving from suspicion towards something more honest, looked at her father and then at Tola and said, simply, "She helped us find Samuel." She said it to Femi, but she said it for the room. Whatever she came here for, that is what she did. Femi looked at his sister on the screen. Saad gave a small nod. He turned back to his chopsticks with the air of a man who had received the answer he was looking for and was satisfied. Samuel was quiet through most of dinner. He watched. He asked small questions. Toward the end of the meal, He reached into his jacket and placed something on the table, a photograph his grandmother had kept. Amara, young and laughing, holding a very small baby. On the back, in handwriting none of them recognized, Kong Su, 2 months. He sleeps like his father, completely still and completely stubborn. Miho looked at the photograph for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were bright. "My brother would have loved you," he said to Samuel. Samuel nodded slowly. "I think I would have loved him too." 2 days later, Tola's last day in Seoul, Miho took her to the market near the old palace that he had mentioned weeks earlier and quietly never mentioned again, waiting to see if she would. She had. It was a cold December morning, pale light, the market smelling of roasted chestnuts and something sweet she couldn't name. They walked slowly, not because they were tired but because neither of them was in a hurry. He stopped to point things out. She asked questions. He answered them without making her feel like a tourist. At some point, without either of them marking the moment, his hand settled near hers as they walked, and then it was simply there, and she did not move away. At a stall selling small ceramic dishes, she picked one up, pale blue with a simple brushstroke pattern. "For Saad," she said. "She collects these. My wife used to buy one from every place she visited," Miho said. She had a whole shelf. "Mine too," Tola said. A shelf in the kitchen. Drove Deli crazy. They stood there for a moment, both of them holding the particular warmth of people who have loved someone for a long time and learned that talking about them can be a way of honoring rather than hurting. "What do you think he would say?" Miho asked. "Deli. If he knew where his hidden ring had led." Tola considered it genuinely. He would say he should have sent the letter himself 30 years ago and saved everyone a great deal of trouble. She smiled. And then he would say he was glad it worked out. Miho smiled too, quiet, real, the kind that cost something. She bought the dish. They walked on. At the end of the market, where the stalls gave way to a small square with a view of the palace walls, they stopped and stood in the cold morning air and looked at the city that had held this secret for 3 decades and was now, slowly, releasing it. "I'd like to come back," she said. Not a question. Not quite an invitation. Just honest. "I'd like that," Miho said. "Very much." It was not a declaration. It was 2 people in their late 50s and early 60s who understood loss and time and the precise weight of a second chance, standing in the cold together and deciding, quietly, that they were not done yet. Tola thought of the ring, now resting in Miho's wooden box. She thought of Jay, who had carried shame so long it had cost him everything. She thought of Deli, who had carried someone else's secret out of love and had not known how to put it down. She thought of Samuel, asleep in his hotel room with a photograph of his mother in his bag and a family he had not known existed a month ago. She thought that the things we hide do not disappear. They wait. And sometimes, if we are lucky, they find their way home by a road we never would have chosen ourselves. She was 58 years old. She was standing in Seoul on a cold December morning next to a man who made her feel like the future was still a real place. It was enough. It was more than enough. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who believes it's never too late for love, and subscribe to Hanroot Stories for more unforgettable Afro-Korean journeys. What would you have done if you discovered a secret like Tola's after 34 years of marriage? Tell us in the comments. We read every one. And if you love heartfelt Afro-Korean stories with hope, mystery, and second chances, subscribe to Hanroot Stories.